Welcome to Forum 360 on Fusion, your PBS channel. This is Leslie Ungar, your host today. Thank you for joining us on our global outlook with a local view. We are co-sponsored by the Akron Jewish Community Center. We used to say it was 90 miles from Florida, that exotic, appealing country of Cuba. Then Diana Nyad says it is 103 miles, and she should know because she swam every mile of it. So 90 or 103 miles, it is still exotic and still appealing. The country of Cuba evokes strong feelings almost 60 years after Castro came to power. As part of the 2014 normalization of relations, some U.S. companies can now do business in Cuba. A local Northeast Ohio company is one of those companies doing business or trying to do business in this country where you can dance salsa or you can eat salsa. Welcome to Mark Cheplowitz, the Wizard of Oz, to Forum 360.
Buenos días. ¿Cómo está?
Buenas noches.
Is it nighttime?
Well, it could somewhere.
That's the only thing I know.
It is nighttime somewhere, and you know about what I know. So, hola. And,
hola.
That's right, and muchas gracias. So let me ask you, why Cuba? You have produced shows in different parts of the world, so why did you want to go to Cuba?
Well, because
it's there, and if you say it's there.
It is there. It is there. And actually, I don't know if you know this, but we have a little family history with Cuba. Nothing I can talk about here. But
so were you in the witness protection program?
No, it was a long time ago. It was actually involved my mother. So, but that was a long time ago. And but my point is, it had come up over and over as we grew up. So there was an interest there. Mm-hmm. And curiosity, mm-hmm. and a lot of that is family, folklore and whatever. So I wanted to go there, and I had an opportunity, so I went for it.
I can understand that because my parents honeymooned in Cuba.
Where?
3-week honeymoon.
Wow.
Which we don't even have today's world. No one takes a 3-week honeymoon. But in Cuba, obviously right before the trouble started in the 50s. But so I can kind of understand you grew up hearing about it.
Right.
Well, before we actually talk about it, I want to know, how did you physically get to Cuba? Because when Americans weren't allowed to, they had to go to Canada and they had to pretend they were going with a group from Canada or Europe or something. So how did you physically? Because I don't think you swam like Diana Nyad. I don't think you swam the 103 miles. So how did you get to Cuba?
Actually, I taped a boat together and I paddled over there because I thought I would return the favor. But actually, we had an opportunity to do something with a meetup group. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a meetup. It's a collection of clubs under a meetup umbrella. And we started a group. Myself and my meetup members, of people
locally
that like to travel, but travel by small plane. So one of the exotic ideas we were throwing around was, hey, let's get in a small plane and let's go to Cuba. Well, in March of this year, it was possible to do that. So in the back of my mind, I thought, well, if I'm going to go there more for an educational and a people-to-people thing, then why don't I try to wrap a little business around that and see if I can, while I'm there, set up vendors and look at venues and things like that, whereas I may be able to, at some point really soon, be able to take corporate clients there for their meetings or their, maybe they want to have just a group event there of some kind. So I kind of packaged it all together. So I flew a small plane with 5 other people to Cuba.
So when you say you flew,
I did the driving.
You were the pilot.
I was the pilot.
Okay, so
and back.
That's not your then they let you out or sent you home, one of the two. But that's not your profession, but you fly a small plane, so you physically flew.
That's correct.
So, okay, so how long, it's 100 miles, so how long was the flight?
Well, I picked up the aircraft. I was already in Florida. So the flying club that I belonged to sent 3 planes. I met them in Key West. I was already in South Florida. So I jumped in the driver's seat, if you will, and it took me...
You flew from Key West?
From Key West to Havana's airport.
Okay, so...
In about 45 minutes.
Wow, 45 minutes
Right.
is all it takes.
Yeah.
All that we've heard from
And
our whole
45
lifetime.
minutes back.
So you are getting, you're in their airspace.
Correct. I'm
Does
talking
it
to the
sound,
controllers.
okay, does it sound different than if
No,
you're in airspace?
There's an accent, of course, but the international aviation language is English.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't matter. I can go to China and I can hopefully communicate, but there is, accents and things, and they call aviation terminology sometimes a little different. I had no trouble at all. And there's a great story about that too, because, which we will get to in a minute, this event that I did there, the controller that was talking to me on the radio was an honored guest at the event I produced. So he came up to me and he went, "I know you, I recognize your voice. I talked to you I was the tower controller."
I don't want to know which one is his side job and which one is his real job.
What do you mean?
Well, he was the guest, right? And
He was a guest at the event I was producing.
Right.
And he was also, his real job
is being the controller.
Right, but I will put this all into a nice little bow for you here in a minute.
Well, before you do that, tell us what it is that you do that you think you can or want to do in Cuba.
Well, right now in the United States, Caribbean, and Europe, Wizard of Oz, spelled AHS, we produce shows. There are events, galas, television, any number of types of corporate projects, not too much social, but a lot of corporate projects.
Can you tell us a show that we would know that you produce so that we can understand what you do?
For 15 years, I was one of the producers of the enshrinement ceremony for the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Okay.
The halftime shows, and ESPN and NFL Network were also my clients. In Cleveland area, I was the grand opening producer of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the most recently, the chandelier lighting ceremony at Playhouse Square.
Okay, so that's what, when you talk about producing, you're talking about producing any one of those kind of productions.
Right, and candidly, there's usually a television component attached to it, so it's that side as well.
Okay, so you and your meetup group decide that you want to go to Cuba, and you think that, well, I'll see if I can maybe talk about doing some business there at the same time.
Right.
So what kind of business did you foresee yourself doing in Cuba?
Well, in the long-term planning, I wanted to be one of the most qualified companies to do events there. Maybe a company wanted to launch a product there. Maybe they want to have an incentive travel trip there. Maybe they wanted to have a meeting there just to say they did it.
Went to Cuba.
Went to Cuba. So I wanted to be in the forefront of that.
Okay.
Well, that was down the road, but I needed to be a forward thinker and get all of these vendors and contacts and venues so that I was ready to go.
So this is March, right, of 2017.
17. Right.
Okay. So did you find a lot of other Americans like you? I mean, like, were you stumbling over Americans with the same kind of idea of wanting to get on the ground floor in Cuba?
There's a lot of people talking about it. I didn't see a lot of people actually doing it, but while I was there, there was a lot of individual travelers there, families. I have to tell you, there's very little English spoken there. They really are not bilingual country. It's easy for me to say. But it was refreshing to be at a cafe or at a Paladar, a restaurant, and hear somebody talking with a New York accent or whatever. It was just refreshing. So it's a country in transition, no doubt.
Now, I have to ask you, because when we hear about Cuba, I think the first thing that comes to most people's minds that we hear about are the cars.
They're everywhere.
Yep. It's the cars from the 50s.
That's right.
Because they haven't been able to get any new cars, so all you see are these old cars.
That's
Did
right.
you see that?
You can't not see them.
Really?
They're everywhere. They're their national treasure. My understanding is if you had $5 million and wanted to buy one of those cars for $5 million, they will not let it leave the country.
Really?
You just can't take them out of
Now,
there.
are they still driving them? Or
They
just
are driving them.
hanging around
Some
on
are in different stages of rehab, if you will. There are some beautiful specimens, and there are some shaky specimens. But I'm going to tell you, it's not just the 50s American cars. They have the Russian cars. They're from the 50s. The Lada automobiles, and some of the other countries that are there.
Now, I read that Airbnb couldn't wait to get into Cuba and start signing people up. But what about Uber? Like, do they have Uber, or did you try
I
to?
think Uber relies on the internet. They don't have internet down there of any value. There are hot spots. You can always tell where they are because there's groups of people congregating, and the internet service that they do get is incredibly slow. So I don't think Uber is ready for prime time there, anything like that.
Now, what about their hotels? Did you stay in a hotel?
I stayed both times I was there. I was there for site inspection for the show I was doing, and then I also stayed as part of that travel group. So both times I stayed at a private residence, if you will,
okay,
that is in the business of renting out rooms.
So what was that like? I mean, was it the 50s? Was it the 60s? Was it the 90s? Was it the 2000s? What would you compare it to?
They were both. The first time I was there, it was a very nice place. It was run by 2 women. They had 3 or 4 rooms. They provided breakfast. It was a renovated, one of the older homes that was renovated. It was nice. It was really nice, and they were very nice. Didn't speak a word of English, but they were great. The next time with the group, and we can talk more about this, some of the hotel plans came off the rails, which is very easy to do there. And we stayed at a not so nice, it wasn't terrible, but it was probably at the lower limits. Again, a guy that rents out his apartments, his rooms.
Hot and cold water?
Oh yeah.
Did you see anything crawling in your bed?
No, you know what? First of all, the people there are very nice. Number 2, it's pretty clean. Yeah, it's pretty clean. They have, a lot of people think Cuba is third world. It's not third world. It's maybe second world, but it's not what you think. It's a lot more modern than you think. It's just that you got to remember this is a country that is primarily owned by the government.
So what did you find when, and I know that a lot of the Cubans couldn't speak English, but what did you get the feeling that they thought of Americans?
They were welcoming. At least everybody that I talked to, they couldn't be nicer. They are very happy people. They accept their world, if you will. Happy to see Americans or other tourists. Remember, other tourists have been going there for years. It's just a new thing for us.
Right.
They are excited. A lot of them are getting into tourism, if nothing else, just to make ends meet, because they don't make a whole lot through the government. But they know how to make those dollars stretch, for their budgets. Now,
did you find that, or legally, if you want to do business in Cuba, do you need an internal partner?
Yeah, well, I do, at least where I'm at right now. I have to work with a U.S.-based and they talk in some ways to a Cuban-based, and this is not easy. It took a lot of time just to get to the first dot of a whole line of dots that you connect in order to make an event happen. And let me tell you, it is fraught with how do I say this politely? Experiences.
That will all be come in handy, and we're going to hear about those in just a minute. Today we are looking at Cuba from a different perspective. A Northeast Ohio businessman who has gone there recently in this calendar year to do business as an American doing business in Cuba. So we welcome Mark Cheplowitz, Wizard of Oz, to hearing a more recent update about Cuba. So what if your magic wand worked and you could do whatever kind of business you wanted to, what kind of business would you want to do in Cuba? How much time would you want to spend in Cuba?
I love it there. I love it there. I love it there. I love it there for so many reasons. I love it there because the food is great. I love it there because the people are nice and for the most part genuine. I like it there because it's novel. I like it there because it's close. I don't have to fly a half a world away in order to do my shows. And oh, by the way, I can get back really fast. I like it for a lot of reasons.
But now, every time you went, did you fly your own plane?
No. The first time I went, I was stunned at how easy it was. At the time, Spirit Airlines was going. Like I said, I was already in Florida, and so I needed to go there and do the meetings and have the site inspections. Called up Spirit. First, I did it online. I booked it. I don't even want to tell you. It was $50 round trip from Fort Lauderdale.
Wow.
Yeah, $50 round trip.
Your first time?
My first time.
Did it change over?
Well, it's come and gone, and Spirit, I understand, pulled out because they weren't getting the traffic that they thought they were going to. And I don't even know what's happened since President Trump, changed the rules there a little bit.
Right,
but it was pretty easy. They did the license, the visa for you to come in. They have a partner that does it. They transfer you to them, do the whole thing. It's waiting for you at the airport. I mean, it couldn't be more painless. No lines, no messing around, not on our side, not on their side.
Did you have a lot of questions you had to answer
Well,
going
I
or
made
coming
myself
back?
crazy looking at all the things I thought I was going to need to know going there the first time, and they made it so easy. And this is not a plug for Spirit. They're not going there anymore as far as I know right now. It just went, I don't know if you know this, but you have to have a insurance card from Cuba.
Oh. Yeah.
And $3.50. But you have to know where to get it.
Sure. And you have to have it before you land.
You have to have it in your possession, this temporary insurance card. Spirit took care of all that. It was great. It was great. Now, there are companies out there now, if you were to go by yourself, they call them, I think there's actually a name for this, but I'm going to call it Cuba Handling or Cuba whatever, and they take care of a lot of this for you at a cost.
In 2014, normalization of relations between Cuba and the United States, contractors and specialists can provide goods and services in certain categories. So how do you fit into what is now allowed either under 2014 or, with the rollback of normalization? How are you going to be able to continue to do business under, what category do you fit?
Well, if you look through the categories, there's either 12 or 14 of them.
Yeah, public housing,
and
transportation, water management,
Yeah.
waste management, non-nuclear electricity generation.
And there's more. But the one that I thought I was going to go under
Okay.
Was the wrong one. It turned out to be like political activism. When you read down through the paragraph, I went, no, that's not me. So we go under what they call people-to-people license. And before Trump's change, you could go pretty much as an individual. You're there to make connections on a cultural level. You're there to make exchanges, which is how we went both times. I was just going in advance of this big group that was coming down. So, but that's the license. Now, you can't really go as an individual. The big thing now is you have to go with a group. And they have all these restrictions. I'm not even about to go there and explain a lot of these. It's evolving for me as well.
So are you going to try to continue to keep a footprint there in some way?
We have looked into getting the license from the U.S. Treasury to be an authorized travel entity so that, because we don't do anything, under the rug kind of thing. We're always very above board, and we're going to see. But candidly, I've had a lot of interest, but no takers. So, and I can't tell you why I don't have I don't have any takers yet, but I sure have a lot of people who want to talk to me about it. So I'd like to think at some point it's going to kick in, and I want to be ready.
Got it. Now, you talked about the food, and you talked about the people. So what can you tell us? What were some of the favorite foods that you ate, and did you eat street food?
I did. And here's the thing. I like Cuban food in the United States better than I like Cuban food in Cuba.
It's just like China.
Okay, I've never been to China.
Chinese food in China is nothing like Chinese takeout here.
Okay.
Nothing.
Well, which one do you like better?
Well, it's not so much better. We're used to what we've grown up thinking as Chinese or what you've grown up thinking as Cuban. So how is Cuban food different in Cuba?
Well, first of
Because
all,
I'm going to guess it's more authentic in Cuba.
Oh, well, I would think so.
Yes.
So first of all, you have to think about Cuba and how Cuba is set up. If you have any business, including restaurants, that are at all on the radar, you've been around a while, you're doing business, whatever, probably 51% of your restaurant is owned by the government. So there's that. Then they have these other restaurants called paladars that are privately owned, haven't quite got on the radar yet, or they're working something out or whatever. Those are the restaurants you want to focus on. And this government thing, it's like going to the post office. You've stood in the line at the post office.
I was just there.
It's the government kind of feel you get there. So paladars are livelier. They're probably more creative with the food. I won't say the variety is a whole lot different, but their preparation is.
As a foodie, what did you like best? Out of what you liked, although it was different, what did you like best?
There was this one restaurant I went to more than once because I wanted to try as many different restaurants as I could. There was this one restaurant that I liked. It did something where they made it more of your own personal family style meal. And they would bring, it was a platter of proteins, right? Beef, pork, seafood, chicken, and then they had all the usual sides, the rice and beans and the plantains and the whatever. But the seasoning and the way they presented it and then the restaurant itself, it was fantastic. It was fantastic, and it was priced great. I mean, you can really get in trouble there price-wise if you're not paying attention.
Who could you tell is there, foreigners or locals? Can locals afford to eat there?
Locals cannot, I don't think so. But they were foreigners, but they were Spanish-speaking. Okay. I mean, we were one of the few people that spoke English there.
Now,
but there was this other great place that we went to. I have to tell you, it was in a town called Vinales, and it was
how far from Havana?
2.5 hours by old car.
Really?
Yes, because the old cars are taxis.
I didn't know how to think about how big Cuba was.
Cuba is huge.
Really?
The island of Cuba is huge. I mean, it's a fooler. They have, 6 or 7 international airports? I mean, it is a gigantic place. Wow. We think of it as this little island in the Caribbean. I'm here to tell you, and I can't even begin to give you the square miles or any of that, but I think if you put the southeast corner, southeast corner at the tip of Florida and you drape it across the United States, I think you're into Missouri or something.
Really?
Maybe it's not that far, but it seems that way.
Okay. Bigger than Israel.
And you drive everywhere, and it's 2-lane highways in old cars with no air conditioning. Just pointing that out. And I was there in March. I can only imagine what it is there. Yeah. And it's windy there all the time. So we went to this town called Vinales, and it's where the cigar factory is. You've heard of UNESCO? It's a UNESCO site. And they have mountains there. So we were there with the mountains. We went through a tour of the caves, in the mountains and all of that. But the best part of that was the family-style farm dinner that they arranged for us. That was the highlight of both trips. We sat at this big long table, and they just kept bringing food. And it was one thing after another.
And did you even care? Did you ask, or did you just?
Oh, of course I asked.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't care.
But did you understand the answers?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
you knew what you were
eating. It's more international there. So
okay.
There were a lot more English speaking.
So your very favorite dish?
My very favorite, I didn't have a favorite dish. I loved them all. I didn't have a stand. I think, in Havana, it was that one restaurant with this great, presentation.
Did you feel the politics of the country while you were there? When I was in Beijing, I felt the politics of the country. I felt the feeling of all of the police, their army, whatever, everywhere. I could feel that. Could you feel the politics of the country?
No, it was pretty subdued. And the crime in Cuba is virtually non-existent.
Yeah. Well, let's just say you only commit a crime once.
Well, I can't speak to that, but I can tell you this. You would walk in the old city, and if you walked in a neighborhood like that in any town in the United States, your hair would be up on the back of your neck, you'd be reaching for your pistol, even if you don't own one, and you would be totally freaked out. Here, nobody cares.
But you felt safe.
Oh, it was, nobody cares. It's just so laid back, and there's virtually no crime there.
Now, in just the couple minutes that we have left, you're Mr. Entertainment Man. You're a producer. So did you see entertainment, and what did you think of their kinds of entertainment?
They're really big into music, Cuban music, as you can imagine. They have a floor show, like a Tropicana kind of floor show. I skipped that because everybody told me, you can skip that. But the music is lively. They had a great band in the Havana rum factory. It's called Havana Club, and we all did Havana Club rum tasting. And the band got better and better as we sat there and tasted. I just don't understand how that happened.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Now, what you talked about the people and the food, that the food was not like, Cuban food that you thought. But in one of my last questions, what surprised you most about your trips to Cuba?
It was a combination of things. It was that it wasn't third world. It was more second world or 1.5 world. They were a lot more modern than I expected. How large the country was a big surprise. How little English is spoken there, and the Spanish that is spoken there doesn't work real well on the translator, as I found out. Just because you have Google Translate, and if you're lucky enough to get a connection, they still don't understand it real well. So I thought that was interesting.
So what's the first thing, my very last question, what's the first thing that you wanted when you came back, like a shower or a hamburger? Was there anything that you missed when you were gone?
I wanted to book my next ticket back.
All right. The small country of 11 million people has given us the conga, rumba, mojitos, black beans and rice, and Havana Nights. Cuba, known for its white beaches and tobacco fields, is more a part of our daily discussions than ever before. The Cuba-U.S. relations are now normalized, kind of. In the very first wave of businesses to begin to do business in Cuba is the Wizard of Oz here in Northeast Ohio. Although you may not fly your own plane when you go to Cuba, we've learned a little bit about what it is like in this new wave of normalization. Thank you to Mark Cheplowitz for joining us on Forum 360. Thank you for joining us on our Global Outlook with a local view.
Forum 360 is brought to you with support from Electric Impulse Communications, Kim and Harvey Nelson, Rubber City Radio Group, Acronist.com, Hudson Cable, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Forum 360 supporters, and the Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron.